folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining today's ECHO session. We are recording ECHO sessions for education and quality improvement purposes. They are stored on our Canvas site. If you don't wish to be recorded, please disconnect from today's session. Again, if you've never joined an ECHO, we are an interactive community. We have presenters, our amazing hub team members. So please take a minute and turn on your cameras, be engaged in our conversations, use the chat for asking questions or commenting on it. Another great way is to do a case narrative. It's a great way to learn information from coworkers and colleagues. If you are interested in doing that, please reach out to Early ECHO and do a case presentation. Always remember to protect individual privacy, so avoid using first, middle, or last names. Don't use places that they live, work, any identifiable information. If you have any questions, please reach out to a hub team member. All the hub team members have an asterisk in front of their names, so you could find them on chat easily. Again, if you'll take a minute to rename your profile so we know who you are, where you're from, what your discipline is. We've all been on Zoom for quite a few years, so probably know how to raise our hand and do emojis and all of that. But if you need an example of how to do that, you can, this is what that slide is for. Our certificate of attendance comes after you fill out those surveys. We'll be putting a survey in the chat, so you can even fill it in. Right now, it will get emailed to you after the session, but the surveys are really a way that we are able to keep these sessions free. They provide us great information, so please remember to do those. We are doing them a different way this year. If you've joined our ECHO sessions in the past, we are using Qualtrics instead of RedCap, so they will actually be in the follow-up email, a link for that. Again, Canvas is where we keep any of our information, the slides, recordings, case presentation, the recommendations from the case presentation. So if you'll all get an invite to our Canvas page today. If not, you can always reach out to Early ECHO at usu.edu to request instructions on how to register for that Canvas. Again, case studies. So once again, if you've never been to an ECHO, we will have a didactic portion, time for question and answers. And then we have a case study or a case narrative where we'll be learning about a real life situation. And then we'll go into small breakout groups so that you guys can give your suggestions, and the person who is presenting it, which it is actually a client of mine that we're presenting on today, I'm going to be able to take that information back and share it with the family and the team that I work with. I'm really excited today and to start our 2023 session on feeding. We have April, who is just an amazing, she worked in our early intervention program as our nutrition dietitian and just has a wealth of information. She's now at an extension assistant professor at Utah State University. It looks like she loves gardening and yoga, hanging out with her husband and 5 children. So she must have a lot of time for yoga. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to April.
Thanks, Janelle. It's so nice to be here with everyone, and I wish I had more time for yoga. I'll get maybe 20 minutes a day if I'm lucky, but it's so nice to be with all of you. I really enjoyed working with early intervention and the work that goes on there, and I appreciate all the work that you do as well. I've been looking over some of your professions and what you do, and you do valuable work for people, and I'm so thankful for that. Thank you for all you do and the work that you are so passionate about. I'm excited to come today and talk a little bit about kids and their eating and how to manage some of these difficult behaviors that can be so frustrating to families and to the kiddos themselves. So I love to talk about food. It's probably, you can tell because I'm an RD, I'm a registered dietitian. I have a PhD in nutrition science. So I really love food. I love nutrition. I'm a really good cook and I love to experiment with new things. So food is a really huge part of my life. And I would guess it's probably a pretty big part of your life as well, right? One thing that all human beings have in common is that we need food, right? And we do a lot of food. And we just came off the holiday celebration, and I don't know if you're all like me, but we do a lot of get-togethers that are surrounded, well, it's all surrounded by food, right? Or the food is the central thing, right? We're always so worried, what are we going to eat and what are we going to have? We all have traditions with food, I'm assuming. There's things we really like to eat, things that we have to have. On Christmas Day, we have to have this blueberry jello. My family loves it. And so there's just some things that go with that. Food is also a way that we can bring people together. Have you ever noticed that? It's something that really helps us connect because we all eat. And so it's a place for us to connect and grow together. We have good conversation, and a general experience of being together is great as we're eating some really good, wholesome, wonderful food. So I've talked for just a minute about how positive food can be, but food also can be pretty negative, right? So I want you to think for a minute and maybe put on your child brain for a minute. I want you to think of a food that you really dislike, or maybe that you really disliked when you were younger. Does anybody have any of those foods out there? Just to throw it in chat. There's, oh, Brussels sprouts, okay. Raw tomatoes. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on the mushrooms one, yeah. Cooked peas, you and my daughter would get along really, really well. Broccoli, liver, okay, that one I have never eaten because I just can't get past the look. Squash, okay, I have some kiddos that hate the squash too. Meatloaf, that's an interesting one too. Got a lot of vegetables on there. You guys noticing that trend? Fish, a lot of people, especially in Utah, don't like fish, usually because we haven't had much experience with it, right? Okay, so there's all of these things that we kind of have these negative experiences around. Now I want you to think about why you don't like that food, okay? I want you to, so for example, I didn't like broccoli when I was young. I really hated it because my mom didn't know how to cook it. She would always get like frozen broccoli, you know, the stuff that's all chopped up and it's mostly stems. And then she'd boil it. And it was horrible. Like, and we had to eat it. It was an expectation in our family that we ate our vegetables. And it was just awful. Like I'd gag and I couldn't do broccoli. And for a long time, I couldn't eat broccoli. It was so nasty. I can now because I've learned how to cook it differently. But does anybody have anything to share about why they dislike the food that they put in chat? Texture, that's definitely a big one. Awful smell, yeah. And that's why a lot of people don't like fish, is because it smells terrible. The look of it, yeah, there's just something about slimy broccoli that just, ooh. Okay, the smell of pickled beets, yeah, forced to eat it. That, I'm glad you brought that one out because that forcing can cause a lot of problems, can it? Pressure to eat when I was young. A bland flavor, yeah, see, flavor has a big deal, right? And some of us, if you haven't noticed, some can handle that bland flavor and they like it. Others of us don't. My dad was a rancher, so we had to eat a lot of beef. Okay, so just what was available in your home. All right, well, thank you for sharing that. It's so true. All of these things that you have shared with us is your experience, right? It's that experience that goes with the food that has changed how you respond to that food. So I'm just going to quickly start sharing my presentation. All right. Hopefully you're seeing the correct screen. Let me know if it's wrong. So nope, yeah, all of those things, the correct one. Thank you, Janelle. All of those things really do affect how we accept food. And I want you to think a lot of those situations probably happened when you were young, right? They were something that affected you when you were young, and you just have a hard time getting past that. So when we're talking about children, they're in that stage right now. They're having those inputs and those experiences that can be really overwhelming and really difficult for them to manage. And unfortunately, what happens is with these children, the ones that I've worked with and others people, they label these children. We tend to do that as human people. We label. It's a way for us to kind of understand what's going on and to make sense of what we're doing in life and our environment. But those labels can be kind of hard, right? How many of you have ever used these words when referring to a child and their eating behavior? We probably, all of us, have used something like that or similar to these words in our interactions with children or in how we're speaking about children. I wouldn't say it's necessarily wrong. It's just that we need to be careful that it's not a label that we're giving them, because it can change over time, right? So I like to say that a child is participating in picky eating behavior or difficult eating behavior, but it doesn't mean that they are picky or they are difficult. They're just participating in those behaviors at this time for whatever reason. And one of the biggest ones that I get is picky. As soon as I say picky eating, people's eyes light up and they're like, wait, I have questions. I want to know how to fix this. And I get a lot of discussion from people about this difficult picky eating behavior that children sometimes decide to participate in. And this can be very frustrating for parents and caregivers that are with a child regularly, right? And they want to know how to fix this, how to make things better, how to change the situations that they are experiencing. And unfortunately, or fortunately, either way you look at it, we eat often in a day, right? And a child even needs to eat more often. So this kind of pressure and this frustration and this stress happens in the life of a parent over and over and over again. It's not something they can avoid, and it has to be addressed. And so being able to help them understand these behaviors and help them find ways to solve some of these behaviors or encourage the child to participate in different behaviors is a great way to help them ultimately. So the most common term for this type of eating is picky eating, and it has been used and coined in many different articles. But what does it mean? In a recent article that I read, this is what they defined picky eating as: basically an unwillingness to eat familiar foods or to try new foods, as well as strong food preferences. And I think sometimes they all go hand in hand, and other times it's just one or two things that's causing the problem. But I think this sums up the unwanted behavior that children sometimes participate in. All of us have our preferences, right? That is unique to us. And even children have preferences. Sometimes we forget that they are just little humans, right? And so they have preferences just like we do. But they have not learned emotional control yet. Adults can push past and eat things we dislike or are really not good so that we don't hurt someone's feelings, or because, you know what, it's there, I need to eat, I'll eat it. Children can't do that yet in many senses because they're still learning how to deal with emotional responses and all those inputs like the smell and the look and the texture. They don't know how to push past that. And sometimes it gets the best of them and we get into these stressful meal situations. Often their refusal to eat something can be seen as strong and unyielding, and parents, caregivers can start to think that they are an obstinate person or stubborn, which may not be true. They just may be having a really strong response to that food. Sometimes it's because they're tired, they're emotional. Sometimes it's because they're ill. And I've noticed that with parents. I say, hey, have they been sick? What's been going on in their life? Have we had a recurring sore throat because we have tonsils that need to be addressed, right? So there might be something that's happening physiologically that we don't know about. And they could be telling you that something's wrong through this kind of behavior. So there might be pain associated with their eating, some other kinds of discomfort. But what usually happens is the frustration starts to escalate with parents and caregivers, and then the child. and then it just becomes kind of out of control. And sometimes the cycle can just repeat over and over and over again. So this topic can become kind of emotional. I was really surprised how many times I'd sit in a home during my early intervention days and I would have parents start crying and the emotion would overwhelm them. And it really kind of spoke to my mother heart. So I have 5 children. I have dealt with this kind of eating for a long time. I have some very picky children. And I haven't always handled it well. So I've done it the really wrong way, and have learned to do things better. So my mother heart would go to them because I know how frustrating it is. And why is it so emotional? You know, I kind of started thinking, why is this so emotional? Why does it cause such an emotional response in a parent and a child? And part of it for the parent side is because we know that children need to eat. And there are some reasons why they need to eat. Research has shown over and over again that children need to eat on a regular basis, and they need to eat a wide variety of foods so they get the correct nutrients to develop their brain. We know that if they don't get those nutrients, their brains don't develop correctly. And if they miss those critical stages of development, they can't really go back and get those, make them up in a lot of senses. And so there is that pressure from a parent or caregiver to be like, yeah, I know they need to eat and they need these nutrients so that they can develop to their potential, but they're fighting me and they won't do it. So it comes down to that. I know what's best and I really want what's best for my child, but they won't cooperate. Other research has shown us that if a child by the age of 3, their brain has reached their peak function or their development level. And that's, you know, there's always some gray area there, but on average, age 3 is where we kind of hit that threshold. And so the early feedings can be even more stressful for parents. We know malnutrition can have really long-term effects that can spill over to adulthood. We know that malnutrition also has can be a component in the mortality of a child, so the death of a child, early death, if they get some other kind of virus or infection or something. If they're not nourished, they can't fight those things, they can't get well. And so we have that as well. Picky eating has also been associated with psychiatric symptoms in children. Sometimes they're acting the way they're acting because they're deficient in a certain vitamin or mineral, and they need that in order to be able to do proper functioning in the body. And then, like I said, poor nutrition is associated with chronic disease later in life. But I do want to give the caveat that that is really chronic, extreme malnutrition. And in most cases, it has been studied in like low-income third world countries where we have chronic malnutrition in children. However, I did see some children as I was going through, you know, up to 3 that had such developmental issues that they were in kind of the same state as you would see in a third world country because they couldn't eat and their parents didn't know how to help nourish them. So I think this is one of the reasons that feeding a child can become so emotional for parents, because they know what could happen and they want to help their child avoid that. So with this urgency that is surrounding proper nutrition, that really is an urgency. I felt it as a caregiver, I felt it as a parent, I still feel it. There is an urgency to feed children and to help resolve some of these issues as quickly as possible so that they can get proper nutrition. But there are some truths that we need to understand that come with children that will help ease this burden a little bit. We need to be careful how we are trying to get them fed and realize that some of the things we're doing could be physically or emotionally damaging, and be able to communicate that to parents or caregivers that are doing feeding regularly. So here are a few truths that I have learned and that research supports and backs. 1, you cannot force a child to eat. If any of you have ever tried that, it typically does not work very well. We try all kinds of things, the airplane, we try to open their mouth and force things in, we try to give them things that they like. Ultimately, it's the child's decision whether or not they will eat. The only way we truly can force them is if we do medical procedures like a feeding tube. And sometimes that is indicated. So sometimes that does need to happen. And we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Pressure does not work, and pressure in many different forms, and we're going to talk about that also in a few minutes. It backfires and it doesn't help the child. It usually just causes more stress for them and the parent. Another truth is that a child will not deliberately starve themselves. They don't have that logic. They're not trying to do that. They know they need to eat. Their bodies are telling them that when they function properly, and they won't starve themselves. They will eat. And then hunger and fullness matters. The cues, those hunger cues, they are so innate in a child. They are their instinct. That is how they survive, right? They get hungry. They need to eat. They tell us that they are hungry, right? They cry, they get ornery, they have worse behavior. They tell us they need to eat because it is a survival mechanism. Their hunger is telling them you need to eat so that you can live. And they are directly tied to those instincts. So being able to eat and then being full, they don't override that. Young children especially, as we start to see them grow into the 5 or 6-year-old range, they can start to override their hunger fullness cues. But most of the time, if a child's hungry, they're going to eat. If they're full, they are not going to eat. Okay. Now, a lot of you I know work with children that are not typically developing. We work with disabilities, we work with other disorders that can get in the way of typical responses to food and eating. So there may be medical reasons why a child is refusing food. And I have noticed and been part of, getting the child the help that they need because of medical reasons. And there's many different ones. One of my biggest reasons that I noticed in a lot of my patients was gut problems, particularly constipation. It was definitely an issue because when a child is constipated, they don't feel hungry. And so they don't have that normal appetite, hunger, fullness cycle. And so that gets in the way. So usually if we can resolve the constipation issue, we can resolve many of these behaviors that are causing frustration at meal times. But there are some other things that sometimes practitioners don't think about, and parents definitely need to be informed about. So gut problems. And when I'm talking about the gut, I'm talking about anything from the mouth to the anus. That is considered the gut. So that is long and there's a lot there, right? That could be causing problems. But typical things are allergies, digestion issues. So that slow gut, that slow processing, or one that processes too fast. Swallowing issues. We got a lot of SLPs on the call. You guys can help take over that, the specifics of that. Sometimes kiddos will have low appetite, and we have to work with some medication and other things to deal with that. Heart and lung deformities, they directly affect appetite and ability to eat. So that is what we call stamina. If a child can't get enough oxygen, they're not going to be able to eat for a very long amount of time. And so their amount of food decreases. And so even though they're eating, it's not enough. And then we have those issues just because their heart and lung isn't giving them enough oxygen to be able to do that. If we have mouth and throat deformities and diseases like cleft palate, cleft lips, other things like enlarged tonsils, that's another thing I saw a lot with children is they just felt like they were choking on foods. And so they didn't want to swallow, right? So sometimes that is a problem. And then we get into other more difficult complications. So disabilities and syndromes that are directly tied to eating. Those would be like cerebral palsy, just because they can't function. They aren't able to chew or swallow because of their conditions. Prader-Willi is directly tied to eating and those issues. Another one is Werdening-Hoffman's autism. So a lot of kiddos with autism, a lot of problems there. And then we have other limitations that aren't really considered a disorder, but in my mind they are, because they're just as difficult to handle, and they can be all-consuming for a child. But those would be food aversions or refusals. So sometimes in those things, they're just averse to certain kinds of food. So textures that a lot of you pointed out in our first part of this lecture, that is definitely something that will keep a kiddo from eating. And many of them will vomit. If it touches their mouth, they just can't handle it. It's an aversion that's so strong, they can't handle it. Sometimes it's a refusal to eat certain kinds of foods. So a lot of kiddos that I saw couldn't do meat very well, even ground meats. They just refused meat. It was just too hard to chew, took too long to chew. They didn't feel safe when they swallowed it. And so meat was always a struggle for a lot of kiddos. It took a little more time for them to learn to be able to handle meat. And then we get to our selective eating, which is a little more severe than just a food refusal. I had one kiddo who would only eat white. Literally, they would only eat white foods. So she ate white bread, white yogurt, like a vanilla yogurt. She'd eat mozzarella cheese sticks that were white. She'd drink milk, and she'd eat white rice. So not really a texture thing, because you got a whole bunch of different foods or different textures. It was just a color thing. So that was really interesting to work with that family as well. So there could be medical reasons, and I wanted to point that out because those need to be addressed before we can really move forward with helping a kiddo be able to eat. Knowing what could be stopping them from eating typically will help us be able to make a better plan for them. However, I have used these solutions to picky eating with lots of different kiddos. I use them with kiddos with autism all the time, and it takes a little longer, but they are able to learn to eat and to expand their diet using these principles. So these solutions are things that I have used as I have been counseling, but they're also ones that other experts in the field use to help parents teach children how to eat. So if there's something that a child is dealing with that is impacting their ability to eat, we definitely want to figure that out and find the answer to it. But in most cases, there's really no reason that this child can't learn to eat and have better behaviors at meals using these techniques. So we're going to go over these in a little more depth and talk about them. Just know that I will be referring to these for typically developing children. If you have specific questions on how to use these techniques in other conditions, I'd be happy to answer those questions if I can. I haven't been, I don't have experience with every condition, but I could, answer a little more specifics on specific conditions later on. So first, one thing I think we forget, and I don't know why we forget this, but when a child is young, they are learning so much, right? There's so many inputs coming in, and they're trying to grasp skills, and they're trying to learn, and their brains are just developing at this amazing rate. And we forget that food is part of that learning experience. Children do need to learn to eat. They don't come wired with that ability to eat all kinds of foods. They come with certain instincts to be able to suck, and they learn the chewing and swallowing instincts as they go along. But being able to eat certain kinds of foods is a learning process. And understanding that and being able to be like, oh, I guess they wouldn't know how to eat that, and showing them how and doing the things we can to help them learn in the way that they learn. So it is really important that parents and caregivers know that each child learns in their own way. You may have one child that no problem, they just pick up eating and it's just easy for them. And your other child may not. They may need to learn to eat different things, and it may be slower for them, and that's okay. It just depends on the child, and it's very unique to them. So learning to eat can be stressful because it's difficult for us as adults to be like, why can't you do that? That's so easy, but it isn't for them. Think about when you give a child a new food and they like that new food. It's kind of exciting and fun, right? But when we give them something they don't like, the different reaction that they have, and it's not really that it's I like or I don't like, it's, oh, this one I'm okay with. It's not super like in your face or hard to deal with. This other one, that's a weird flavor. I haven't ever had that flavor or that texture. It may take me some time to build up to that. So like with green beans, I felt like every time I tried to give my kiddos green beans for the first time, it was this weird, right? But the more I persisted in giving them the green beans, the more they learned to be like, oh, okay, I can handle that. It's not that scary. So part of this process is to expose children to the food. in a way that they can handle it, and to allow them to determine how that exposure is going to go, right? They get to choose. And those exposures can be all kinds of different things. They can touch it, not do anything else. They could pick it up and taste it and not do anything else. Sometimes a kiddo will chew it and spit it out. And then the parent's like, wait, why did you do that? And inside of me, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, because they just put a food in their mouth and chewed it up. They may not have swallowed it, but they just had a really good exposure to that food, right? So helping parents understand that all of those exposures are good, even when they're like smashing it between their fingers and they're putting it all over their face, that's an exposure. And they're learning to be okay with that smell, that taste, that texture. And it just takes time. Research suggests that it takes 15 to 20 times or 20 exposures to a food for a child to accept a new food. And that is longer if they're not a typically developing child. So some of my kiddos with autism, it was closer to 50 times, but we saw success. So sometimes it's just the long game of giving them exposures and being okay with them just moving through it, right? Another thing that we know from research that is really, really beneficial is when parents will eat with their child. Being able to see those people that they're with as often, they're with their parents most of the time. And so being able to watch their parent eat that food helps the child go, oh, that's okay, I can do that. I can eat that. And over time, they will get to where they can eat a lot of our culturally relevant family foods that we enjoy. It might not be right at the beginning, but if we continue to expose them to that food, give them the opportunity, it does come over time. But they need somebody to watch how to do it. I want you to think about a taco. Like if you've never seen a taco before and someone put it in front of you and one of the hard tacos, right? Would you know how to eat that? Like you'd have to really think about, okay, how am I going to hold it so that I don't spill everything out the bottom or I don't break it because it's, kind of fragile. And I've seen so many kiddos pick those up and just like crush it. And then they're like crying and stressed. I just ruined the food, right? It's just being able to give them the opportunity to have success in eating and have the opportunity to watch other people eat it as well. And then it brings me to providing food that is appropriate for their developmental stage. A child may not be able to handle a crispy taco at a certain age, 2, 3, 4, 5. It may be different for each child on how they can bite that taco, chew the contents, and then safely swallow it. It just may take them a different amount of time to be able to do it, and it will depend on their developmental stage. If a child can't chew and swallow a carrot, then let's not give them carrots to eat, right? All right, so we need to be aware of what a child can eat and provide those developmentally appropriate exposures to food. Parents are integral in teaching a child how to eat. They really are the boots on the ground. They're the ones doing the work, them and the caregivers. So eating with the child is so key. The research shows that the earlier a child can start eating family meals with their children and including them as part of the family meal, even if they're a baby in arms, if they're there at the meal, it can have a great influence on their ability to eat and accept the foods that are offered. Family meals also give a consistency to eating. A child knows what is expected of them when they come to a family meal, and the rules and the expectations are the same every time. It's a safe place for them to be able to explore new foods, to try new things, and to really connect to their families. So there's a lot of really great research that eating together, even if it's just one parent and one child, can have a huge impact. And then if we can get everyone that's in the home to eat together on a regular basis, it will impact that child and their ability to accept new foods. It also gives them more opportunities to learn. And then the last thing I would say is to help parents understand that a child will learn to eat. They will eat. We just have to trust them to do that, and to do that at their own rate. So this brings me to one of my favorite concepts that I talk to parents about often. This was a concept that was developed by an amazing dietitian many years ago. Her name is Ellen Satter. She was the feeding guru that taught most of us dietitians how to handle children and how to really allow them the opportunity to learn how to eat. And it's great because this gives the rules, right? But then it allows for the flexibility that the parent and the child needs to come together and have a good relationship surrounding food. So this is called the division of responsibility. Sometimes you'll see it as DOR, all capitalized. But this is what the division of responsibility is. And each party has a responsibility and they need to stay within their responsibilities, which is sometimes hard for parents. Kids do it no problem. They're like, yeah, you can keep your responsibilities. Parents have a hard time not getting involved in the child's responsibilities. So a parent is responsible for what is provided for a meal, where that meal will take place, and when those meals take place. Despite a lot of parents understanding the child is not going to dictate when they eat, we are the ones responsible for that. A child is responsible for how much they will eat at a meal and whether or not they will eat at a meal. And that last one is really hard for my parents to take. When I say, if they choose not to eat, that is their choice and it's okay. That's a difficult one for a lot of them to take and own, but it's a true one, is they need to be able to have that knowledge that I cannot eat and it's okay, but also I can't eat again until the next meal. All right, so there's a couple of things that go with that. But the only thing a parent can really control is providing the food, providing where it's at, and providing it often enough for the child to be able to have the choice to eat it and get what they need for growth. This removes so much stress because, like we talked about in the beginning, you cannot force a child to eat. So now the parent, there's no responsibility. The parent is not in charge of how much that child is eating or whether or not they're eating. The parent is just offering the food and allowing the child the opportunity to eat. Remember, we are not trying to fix the child. We are trying to change how we are responding to them. And that's a really key concept, I think, that it's not up to us to push a child into a certain behavior. It's to help them decide to come into a different behavior, right? And the way we're responding to them is going to help them respond differently to us. All right, so pressure. We need to talk about this really quick. The division of responsibility can sometimes, it's freeing, right? It can give parents this permission to be like, you know what, you offer the food. If they choose to eat, great. If not, great. But then parents are parents and sometimes they get stuck in the behaviors that parents get stuck in. And one of those is pressure. So I want you to look at this list for a second and think about this. Do any of these types of pressure, so these are behaviors that adults participate in towards children and food, do any of these surprise you?
I'm surprised by applauding.
Okay, Kearney, you know, most people will say that to me, but it's good, right? Yay, you took a bite, good job. But it's not, it's a form of pressure because the child's finding it courage enough to take that bite, right? Or take it from your hand. And then you are just like, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, I don't know if I can do it again. Now you just put that pressure on me that I made you so happy, but I may not be able to make you happy again. Maybe that's just all I could do today was to take that one bite. And so, yeah, it just becomes a form of pressure. Any others that are surprising? The others are kind of
teaching. And I think I'm not quite understanding what you mean by just teaching.
So that's when we're trying to teach a child why they should eat this. So bananas are good for you. They have potassium in them and they're going to give you what you need to grow healthy and strong. How many times have we said that to child? You need to drink your milk so your bones will be healthy and strong. They don't care. They really don't. And then they start in this pressure like, wait, if I don't drink my milk, are my bones going to break, right? Thinking like a child, it kind of puts you back there and you kind of go, yeah, I can see how all of those create pressure when a child is trying to eat and learn to eat. The bribing, I did that. Wow, I do that. I did that way too often. If you don't eat your dinner, you don't get the treat, right? did that way too often with my kiddos. Coercing, like, come on, I'm in a hurry, just hurry up and take a bite, right? So we do this, we participate in these, we don't even know we're doing them sometimes as a parent. But all of these are creating a pressure situation for a child. I'll tell you a story really quick. I don't want to get too far in our time, but I was counseling a mom that had 2 twin daughters. And it was really an interesting situation because the one twin, she was super healthy. She was close to the top of the growth chart. She ate well. She never had a problem. The other twin was below the growth chart. She was like on our, I don't even know if she had hit the 5th percentile. So she was super low. She wouldn't eat. She really struggled to even like find any ability to keep down anything. We were giving her lots of Ensure and the fortified pediatric drinks, and she just couldn't do it. And the more I watched and counseled this family, I watched the mom, and the mom was always on high. Her stress level was way up here. And when we'd talk about food, she was just like, she would cry and she would talk about how awful she was as a mom. And I can't get her to do this and I can't get her to do that. And it was just a super stressful experience. So one day I was there and I was kind of watching the interplay between, during a meal, I was watching the interplay between mom and the twins. And she put the twins together so that their trays were touching. So they were both old enough to be in a high chair. And the one twin would eat all her food. And then the mom was like, hey, to the one that needed to eat more, she'd be like, hurry, eat. Look at your sister. She's eating. Eat like your sister, you know? And then when the mom's back was turned, I'd watch the typically developing twin take the food off of her twin's tray and eat it for her. These kiddos were like 13 months. It was so interesting to watch. So the one twin was like trying to save her from her mom's disapproval by eating her food. And so I told the mom, I'm like, this is what I want you to do this week, or until I come again. I want you to ignore. I want you to pull them apart so they both can have their own food, so you can kind of monitor what they're eating. And I want you to ignore the twin that isn't eating very well. Keep an eye on her because we always need to watch for choking and those kind of things. But don't respond to her. Don't ask her to eat. Don't ask her if she wants more. Let her ask you for food. And the mom kind of did that for a couple of days, and she was noticing that the twin was eating more on her tray. And one day she turned to her, she's kind of watching out of the corner of her eye as she was picking up food and eating it. And she turned to her and she's like, oh, yay, good job, good job. And she was done. She wouldn't eat anything the rest of the meal. So interesting, but so true, right? Kids know. And that stress of the mom was just impacting that child to a point where she couldn't eat. And the stress was just too much for her. Okay, I think I got my feet frozen. All right, so another thing that's really important when we're talking about feeding with children is that they have a schedule. Remember we talked about how there needs to be that hunger and fullness cycle? Well, if a child always has access to food and is doing what we call grazing, that means that they can just take, a couple crackers here, or I can sip my milk, here and there all the time. They never build an appetite. They never really get to feel what hunger is and that drive to eat, which sometimes will overrule our aversions to certain foods, right? And so we need to avoid grazing, not allowing children to have access to food all day long. In fact, I tell parents, you put it away, you put it in the cupboard, and the kitchen's closed until the next meal. But this only works if parents are offering meals every 2 to 3 hours, depending on the child's age. So I typically worked with younger children. So it was usually within that 2.5 hour range that we were going to offer a morning meal. If they chose not to eat, it's okay. You don't have to stress, because in 2 hours, we're going to offer a snack. And if that snack needs to be a little more significant, more substantial, because they didn't eat the morning meal, that's okay, right? And then keeping to this schedule so that they are able to really feel their hunger and their fullness will really help. And then another huge key is no food or drink between meals except water. Too many times I'd be in a house and the parents would be like, no, they don't have anything. They just carry their sippy around. And then I'd be like, what's in their sippy? And it was usually milk. And they were drinking so much milk a day. So they weren't getting that hunger cycle that helps to motivate kids to eat. Another thing that's really important is consistency with kiddos. Make sure the meals are eaten in the same place, limit distractions, eat with other parents, siblings, and consistently, right? A kiddo is going to be more willing to eat when it's a social thing. It's fun. I want to be there. Child must choose from the food offered during the meal, all right? The parent gets to choose what is offered for the meal. The child does not. So this avoids that stress of becoming a short order cook, right? The kiddo is saying, hey, I want pizza, and you're going to give me pizza. No, this is what's for lunch. You can choose from what I've given you for this meal or not, but this is what it is. I usually encourage parents to give them 3 to 4 choices at a meal and 2 to 3 choices at a snack, and have the food out where they can get it and grab it. They don't get to tell you what they want. You just say, hey, here's the meal. You pick or don't pick. It's up to you. Follow the eating schedule. That will help with consistency. And remember, meals should not be really long and drawn out. That sometimes will cause a problem too, because then it's eating into our other time, right? And then everyone needs to follow these eating rules, especially dads. And I don't mean to like point out dads, but most of the time when I was counseling parents, the moms were like, what do I do about dad? He comes home from work and gets out the ice cream, and then he feeds them ice cream an hour before dinner, and then they won't eat. And then I don't want to have to deal with giving them food again before they go to bed, right? So you can see how that's a push and pull. All right, we are almost out of time, but I just thought I'll finish up with a couple troubleshooting things. So what about treats? What if I don't want my kid to have treats? I think we need to relax that a little bit, because kiddos are going to have treats. They're going to want treats, and they can have the treat as long as it's part of a meal or a snack. So it's in the eating schedule, and you are more than welcome to limit how much of that they get, right? They can have a cookie. They can't have the whole bag of cookies. So they can still have it, and it is part of life, and it's okay for kiddos to have treats now and again. We don't want to be so rigid that it becomes a stress and something that they're always focused on. What about healthy foods? My kid won't eat fruits and vegetables. Keep offering it to them, and they will eventually. Most parents look at me with disbelief when I say that, but it's true. It does happen. They do get there. Make meals pleasant. It should be an exciting place to be. Meals are good. Let's make it pleasant. And what the parents and the caregiver does most of the time is going to dictate how that meal is. Remember, there are rules. If the child does not have the behavior that's expected, then there will be a consequence. But be present with them. Put away the distractions. Don't have your phone out. Talk to them. Make it a fun experience. And then remember to be considerate of the child's food experiences. They haven't had so many yet. They're still working on it. So patience in that realm will go a long way. So, well, thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Sorry for the quick shift at the end, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer a few before you head off into your case study.
April, thank you so much for taking your time to share that with us. You can put any questions into chat, or just come unmute or raise your hand and we'll call on you.
I have a question about I noticed explaining was on the list of types of pressure. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about how to balance like sensory play and explaining, and not becoming pressure, but still giving them that opportunity to explore the textures, and maybe explaining like, oh, that's cold, that's hot. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I don't really think that falls into the explaining realm. I think you're just helping them explore food. And so I think that's great. When we're saying, oh, cold or hot, or that's kind of sour. I don't think that's explaining. Explaining is when it's kind of close to like teaching, but I'm explaining, you really need to eat this now because you're going to be hungry later, right? That's an explaining. It's like, why do I want you to eat now when you don't want to eat? They don't care. They just don't want to eat, right? But describing foods, that's great, because that's helping them learn. And if that's how your kiddo learns, then yeah, we should be explaining. And with some of our ones that aren't typically developing, we need to give them more inputs like that. So yeah, you can totally use feeding time for other therapies, like, hey, orange carrots, right? how many carrots? We could totally do that. That just makes it more like a relaxing, exciting experience with mom or dad.
April, I just wanted to say I appreciate the information a ton. My comments more to defend dads who love ice cream.
And I love dads that love ice cream.
No, it's wonderful to have all this information, and thank you for sharing with us. What are your thoughts on that? What would you suggest for us dads who eat a little too much ice cream?
I think it's great, and I think there is time for kiddos and dads to connect through food. I actually did a paper during my graduate work on dads and eating, and dads actually have a huge impact on child food preferences, especially fruits and vegetables. If dads eat their fruits and vegetables, kiddos are more likely to eat their fruits and vegetables. So having time with dad, especially if dad is the breadwinner, he's the one that's gone more and mom's the one home with the kiddo, they're the ones that can have such a big impact on the kiddo. So making time for ice cream, as long as it's part of one of our meals or snacks, yes, totally cool. If it's time for that, and if they've had dinner and we're getting on to night and they need a snack, ice cream's a good choice. Dad's time.
Thank you. I'll eat my broccoli. I feel pressure.
And then there was one other hand up, but they put it down. And I probably am going to say her name wrong. So, Anaija.
Anjani.
And see, I told you I was going to say it wrong. So
I have a complicated name. I'm from Nepal, so that's why I have this crazy name. So I had a family, this happened to me last year. I had a family, she came to me and asked me like about her child, like how the child was eating. And I said, he has no problem at school, but then he wasn't eating at home. So mom requested if she could get like the recipes for the food that he was eating at school. And then I think mom was trying to like maybe switch or like just to have him eat, like trying to figure out like what foods she could introduce so that he could eat. But so this family they're Hispanic family, so obviously the taste and everything is different as well. So I just want your thought on what would you say in this situation where the parents are like trying to, change. He obviously likes school food and trying to change it at home as well. Like, what would you tell a parent, like if this was to happen again, and if I was to talk to a parent and if they come up with the question like, should I still introduce the same food or, should I change?
So April, before you answer that, I'm just going to give a plug. That is an amazing case presentation. So if you would like to present that case next month, we're talking about feeding again, and it would be amazing. And you'd get a ton of information from everybody on the call, but I'll let April answer.
I agree. That is an awesome case study because I've had that happen before, especially with people that are assimilating into a new culture. But I believe, and research supports this, that cultural foods are really important for families. They're part of what binds them and part of what binds them to their culture. And so it's important that the children learn to appreciate and accept those cultural foods, as well as the easier to eat foods we have in America that are a little more appealing. Okay, I know I shouldn't say that, but that processed food is really appealing to children. So what I tell the parents is you continue to offer your cultural foods and you encourage the schedule, because a lot of times it's the schedule problem is the kiddo comes home from school and they just eat a bunch of junk and then we're eating dinner an hour later and they're not hungry. And so that's one of the reasons they refuse food. But also they can have one thing there that they know the child will accept. And a lot of times that's bread or a tortilla or something. That eases a lot of parents' minds to be able to say, okay, I know they will eat this, but there's 3 or 4 other choices as well that they can choose from. And it's okay if they just eat bread, they just eat bread. We're just going to keep working on exposures.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, April. We appreciate your time. And we are going to move into our case presentations. I just am going to give everybody a heads up that we'll be going into small breakout groups, doing some introductions. It is always helpful if you have your cameras on. This is a great way to just learn more information from your colleagues and other people in the field. Like I said, I'm going to do the case presentation today. I don't always get to do those because I am always facilitating. So I'm always excited when I get to have you guys brainstorm the cases that I'm working on. So I'm going to share my screen. Are you guys seeing the right screen, Bailey? Okay, I saw Kathy give me that heads up. Hey, so just so you're aware, I am a special educator, an autism specialist. I work in the Part C up to 3 program here in Northern Utah. Yeah.
Sorry, it is on presenter mode. So we can see
'cause
like your next slide.
Probably on the wrong screen.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. Now, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So the little kiddo that I would love some information on is, his name is Guy. He is a 33-month-old. He's the youngest of 5 kids. Mom does work as a 4th grade teacher and dad stays home with Guy. He's a very picky eater. He only has about 5 to 6 preferred foods that he eats. Mealtimes are really important for families. They want mealtimes to happen as an entire family. He is very limited on his spontaneous language. And here's his most recent BDI scores. So gross motor and fine motor and cognitive were not significant. Receptive, expressive, social, and adaptive are all severe to mild and moderate. Primary areas of concern that the family has is to have him enjoy new foods and textures, have him sit with the family, and limit that grazing between meals. So some of the goals that we have on our IFSP is that he would participate in mealtimes by eating a variety of foods. We want him to eat 2 to 4 bites of each food group for at least 1 meal a day, and then using those single words to communicate in meal times and play times. Some of the barriers are that the parents aren't on the same page with the expectations. So mom really wants meal times to happen more consistently. Dad is okay with the grazing between meals. Having 5 kids and some challenges, they really have disorganized meal times. So in our small breakout groups, I'd love to have some ideas about how to set up meal times so the family is successful. What kind of foods could we increase? How do we limit grazing between meals and increasing communication between meals? So Bailey, do we have 4 breakout groups?
Yeah, we have 4 breakout groups.
So will you tell me who's in breakout group number 1, the hub member?
Kirsten.
So Kirsten, will you guys in your breakout group talk about setting up meal times for success with family? And then Bailey, who's in group number 2?
Group number 2 is Heather and Sue.
So Heather and Sue, will you guys talk about increasing food types? Who's the next one, Bailey?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't. Group 3 is Pat.
So Pat, will you guys talk about limit grazing between meals?
And group 4 is Kate and Shelby.
And you guys are increasing communication between those meals. So if you'll just make sure, once again, we're going to be doing those introductions, turn on your cameras, and then we'll be coming back. So Bailey, you can.
The rooms are open. You should see that to join.
Okay, well, like I said, as we were waiting, I have put the survey link into the chat. So if you want to take a minute and do this survey, if you have a note taker or whoever took notes, if you will send them to both Kate and myself. Kate, are you ready to help with recommendations? I know that you're adjusting. So do you want to put your email in chat as well? And then also, just so you guys know, our next session will be, we will have our amazing Pat Boyle talk to us about feeding in early intervention. So join us next month, February. Again, our echo sessions this year we're doing in chunks. So our first ones will all be about feeding. Then we're going over behavior, sleep, and following it up with some autism topics. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll hopefully see you next month, and take a minute and complete that survey. Have a great rest of your day. And I'm just gonna tag you again, Anja. I know I said your name wrong again. Dang it. But if you're interested in doing that case presentation, that would be a great one.
Yes, I will be happy to. So
Okay, well, great. Kate will reach out to you and get you some
Okay.
ways to do that.
okay. Sounds
I
good.
still have your number, so I got you.
Yes, I
Thank
have the
you.
email address. So
Perfect.
Thank you all.
So that'll be for visits moving forward. So for today's visit, on the website.